Look, it's been a long time, and I can't believe we finally got to this point where Lewis Hamilton has signed a contract for Mercedes in 2021. It was only a 1-year deal, so not what Mercedes were looking for in terms of a multi-year deal. It does mean officially at the moment, none of the Mercedes drivers are signed up for 2022 onwards. So, the deal has been done, but perhaps not to what Mercedes like. Sam, who's the winner of this negotiation period?
Well, first things first, in the words of Ainsley Harriott and the legend that he is, this makes the drivers' market next season hot and spicy. I mean, it is really cooking up a storm for the kind of silly season / winter period next year. The fact we've got Russell, Bottas, Hamilton and a few other drivers around the market not signed up for longer than a year to go. I think we thought this year was crazy. I think next year is going to be absolutely crazy. It's going to be bonkers. Mercedes have got it all, haven't they? They've got all those world titles. They are the most successful team in terms of historic achievements in a row. And now they've got the world's best drivers sat there at their disposal when they want to do anything they can. Hamilton, I think, is a little bit unsure about the dominance that Mercedes is going to carry into the new era. I think with the lack of spending, the change in development, how well some of the middle ground teams have done on that lower budget. Aston Martin, Racing Point have done very well historically with that lower budget. I think that he thinks Mercedes aren't necessarily going to be the force that we've seen. So maybe he wants to retire anyway. Maybe he wants to hit that 8th title and walk away. Maybe he isn't so sure that, he can carry on the I've won a racing every single season of my entire career. So I think he's going to wait and see. Of course, Mercedes also have George Russell in the waiting. And they don't want to keep him at Williams for too long. He will leave that programme. He will go somewhere else. He is better than a back marker team. And it'll be good to see him move up. I think he'll get that chance next year regardless of what Bottas or Hamilton does. I think Russell will take one of those seats if he has a good season this year. I think Bottas is gone. And I think the only way Bottas stays is if Norris doesn't want to go to Mercedes, because Norris is obviously managed by Toto Wolff, and the McLaren-Mercedes partnership, I think, opens that door for Norris to move up there. You can have a Norris-Russell-Mercedes lineup. Or they literally can't find anyone else in the paddock that is willing to drive that Mercedes, which somehow I don't see happening. The only thing Bottas has under his belt is the fact that he is an experienced Mercedes driver. He knows that team. That is it. That's all I can see going forward. But a new era, Bottas hasn't exactly, shown success. He hasn't done what Rosberg was able to do. He is the least successful Silver Arrows driver of all time, pretty much, which is not the best, accolade to have. So I think Mercedes have got all the cards in their deck. I think that they can pick and choose who they want. Worst comes to worst, they end up with Russell and Bottas. Not a bad lineup. They can have Russell or Norris. They can have Russell or Hamilton. I think either way, they're going to be looking pretty good for the next couple of years.
What do you reckon, Harry? Do you think there's a winner in this negotiation between Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes?
I think both parties have done pretty well. I know Mercedes might have hoped for they don't tend to do 1-year deals with Hamilton. They do them with Bottas, but they'd like to snap him up for longer. But there is that commitment in the contract about improving diversity, etc. within F1 in Mercedes, and even if he's not driving that car, I think he'll still be around the Mercedes fold. But in terms of Mercedes, I think they'll still be happy because either way, and as Sam's already mentioned, they've got so many options for 2022. I think if Hamilton does leave, I think Bottas is still relatively safe because I can't see them going for an all-new lineup. I know Russell's a known quantity now, but it's quite a big move for the reigning world champs, as we assume they will be again this year, to go for a brand new lineup. So I think it could be Bottas Russell, it could be Hamilton Russell, it could be Hamilton Bottas again. Who knows? So I think for them, they've got so many options on the table now. Yeah, and we're gonna have to go through this all over again next year, aren't we? It's gonna be this time next year. We'll be like, and Hamilton's either signed again, or he's retired, or who knows? Yeah, I think both parties will be relatively happy. I think it gives Hamilton an opportunity to go for his 8th. There's every possibility this could be his last year. Could go for the 8th and leave, or he might want to stay and do the new regs. Who knows? But yeah, I don't think this is a bad deal for anyone. But Ben's probably going to prove me wrong now.
I was just thinking how, Sam, you must be salivating at the thought of Bottas being in the Mercedes for yet another season, right? That's all you've ever dreamed of.
I love that Porridge man driving a Mercedes. Bring it on.
Right, so I mean, arguably both sides have won this to a degree because a deal has happened. You know, if a deal hadn't have happened, they'd have both lost out, and in the same way that a deal has happened, and both of them have won to a degree. The best driver on the grid is driving the best car for the best team, and if that combination is in force, then everyone who's contributed to that being a factor has won. You know, ultimately. So I don't think either of them have necessarily lost this. I think between them, Lewis Hamilton has definitely won out of the two parties here. We heard sort of last year Toto Wolff definitely did not want to get Lewis Hamilton on a 1-year deal. He said, I think everything should be done this year. Of course, that didn't happen anyway, but I don't want to go into another negotiation mid-year next year, which is ultimately what's happened here. So Mercedes have not got him on the deal that they want, but they've got him. And that's got to be worth something. I think a compromise probably would have been 2 years. I imagine Mercedes would have wanted to snap him up on a 3-year deal. Hamilton, clearly this is Hamilton-led. It's quite ironic that we've got Hamilton and Bottas on the same deal in terms of length. However, the ways in which they've got to those deals are completely the opposite scenarios. Bottas's contract is completely Mercedes-led, whereas Hamilton's contract, being 1 year, is completely Hamilton-led. They're on the same deal, but completely different reasons why they're there. I think, you know, Lewis Hamilton has won this just because he's got the flexibility at the end of this year to do whatever he wants to do, as you've sort of referenced already, Sam. And flexibility is good for a driver. You know, you could say if he was less integrated with Mercedes or less successful, you could say, well, a longer term deal means he's got more security and it means he's got more of a chance to embed himself in the team. Lewis Hamilton doesn't need to worry about those things, given his success and given what he's able to do. From Lewis Hamilton's perspective, you know, those aren't factors where they would be for other drivers. I think the problem here with Mercedes and the situation that they're now in is that they have rivals who have got more of a future lined out than they do. Max Verstappen is there until 2022, Red Bull of course that is. Both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz are going to be at Ferrari in 2022. They're locked in for the next 2 years. You know, you've got the McLaren team, they're locked in for 2022 as well. Alonso, you've got plenty of these drivers that are signed up for the next few years, and Mercedes are in the position right now where they don't know what their lineup is going to be next season. They haven't got either of their drivers confirmed, and I would argue that one of the things that has meant Mercedes have been so strong since they've returned to Formula 1 10 years ago is their stability, and it is their transitioning between drivers. They've had 4 drivers in the last 11 years. That's literally the definition of stability. And when they've needed to bring someone in, they have been more than ready to be in that position, and they've never done 2 at a time. You know, Rosberg was more than ready for when he made that switch. And Schumacher, of course, he was ready. He's Michael Schumacher, and Lewis Hamilton was already a world champion when he joined. Valtteri Bottas was nowhere near that successful, but he'd done a number of years at Williams prior to moving. So, you know, there's always been this transition period, and I always see it as sort of these stages where you have a driver, let's take Charles Leclerc or Max Verstappen, where they have that integration time in the team. Charles Leclerc specifically, you know, gets to learn the ropes at Alfa Romeo Sauber for a year, moves into the Ferrari seat as the number 2 driver, doesn't have too much pressure to begin with, takes on that number 1 role as he has done, even if it wasn't intended to be that way. And now he's got time to hone his skills. Very similar to the Verstappen transition as well. Verstappen and Leclerc are both at the very end of that transition period. George Russell's right at the beginning of it still. And that has a real risk catching up to Mercedes at some point in the future. So that's why, you know, 2 1-year deals here isn't perhaps brilliant for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton, I think, has won out of the 2 parties, but for me the biggest winner here is Valtteri Bottas, because Bottas is the one that brings that stability. Yes, like I say, he's on that 1-year deal, but that's not out of his choosing, that's out of Mercedes' choosing. If Hamilton signs a 3-year deal, I can't see any scenario where George Russell or someone else is in that seat next year. Probably Russell. Because at that point, you've got at least 2 years where Hamilton and Russell are teammates. And if Hamilton wants to go at the end of those 3 years, Russell's already had a few years at Mercedes, about 5 years in Formula One full stop, and he's ready to take on that role. What do you do now? He's only got a 1-year deal. If you don't know if Hamilton's sticking around for next year, how can you can't make a decision on Bottas, because if you kick Bottas out and then realise Hamilton's not going to be there either, do you really want to go into 2022, brand new regulations with a brand new lineup? That doesn't seem very Mercedes. So I actually think Bottas' stability here might be a big factor for him gaining maybe one more year out of that seat.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have Russell go alongside one of the two current drivers, especially if you're going to be in a world championship fighting car. Bottas, well, I mean, what's he got to do really to kind of get himself a deal that's longer than 1 year? Has he got to win the championship? Has he just got to continue to finish second? I mean, a lot of people argue he's done everything he needs to do realistically to bring home the Constructors' title for Mercedes, but I think he'd be a semi-good mentor for Russell should Hamilton choose to leave, and I think it all comes down to Hamilton. I think Hamilton has more power than Mercedes here, really. Mercedes will want to keep Hamilton regardless. Why wouldn't you want to keep the GOAT in terms of statistics in your team? So I think that Hamilton gets to dictate the play regardless of what happens. If he goes, then Bottas has almost got another year to make it work at Mercedes. If he says, I don't want to go, but then Russell goes, well, I don't want to be at Williams anymore, Bottas gets the boot. So it's very interesting that Bottas essentially is waiting for everyone else to make their decision before he gets to say what happens to his own career, which kind of sucks for Walter because he's a very lovely guy. So it'd be a shame if he does get ousted, but I guess that's how Formula One goes.
I mean, on paper, and it's a good thing that Formula One isn't run on paper, but it seems as if Lewis Hamilton's got a fairly easy run to the championship, at least comparatively to other seasons, in that, you know, the car is not going to be radically different from 2020, and it was very good in 2020. So, Harry, do you think there's more of a risk he'll leave at the end of 2021 after he's potentially won a record-breaking 8th championship?
I think there's definitely a possibility. Who knows? Now that he signed a 1-year contract, I think all we're going to talk about now for the next year is this Hamilton's last year. If it had been a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract, we obviously wouldn't be speaking about it. And I think he'll still have the talent and speed at the end of this year to keep going if he chooses to. But maybe he is starting to think of calling it a day soon. Who knows? I mean, it would be fairly poetic, wouldn't it, to get the 8th title and then leave? But I don't know. I don't know his motivations as to why he didn't want to sign for longer. What is it to do with? We don't know. Is it to do with money? Is it to do with the ethics in Formula One? Is it to do with the fact he wants to retire? I don't think we'll know that for a long time. So it's a strong chance, but there's also a very strong chance he'll stick around and win 10 titles as well. So I think we'll just have to wait and see. But at least it gives us something else to talk about, which is always good.
Thanks, Lewis. Means a lot.
He's done it for us.
Yeah. Sam, what do you reckon? 8th title, retire on the top of his game. Is it an option for him?
I think that's how I want to go out. I don't know Lewis personally. I've only vaguely been in the same room as him once. I mean, I haven't been picked up by him like I was Eddie Irvine.
You were picked. You've never mentioned that.
No, have I not?
Tell us more about that
deep
story.
sarcasm, people.
I'll get the photo out soon. I think if I was, the greatest driver of all time in terms of statistics, your opinion or not, whatever, I would want to go out on a high. I wouldn't want to end up having all those records and then spending 2 or 3 years in a team that might get a podium regardless of how well I drive or my game falls off a little bit more. I don't think Lewis is in it just to make money. And I think there are some drivers that we've had that were great that were in it just to earn a little bit of extra dollar. I don't think Lewis cares about that. I think he's got enough. I think he knows that his career is paved for him after Formula One, whether it be XDNA, surprise, surprise, it's Lewis Hamilton, or fashion designer Tommy Hilfiger, or whether he goes into some kind of ethical, cultural, environmental role. Who knows? Or maybe he goes into management in sport. He's got his own team now in another sport, Extreme E, of course. He's got so many options. So I think Lewis will want to go out on the top. I don't think he'll want to be sat around in the third or fourth best team if something goes wrong, just driving. So yeah, I think there is a chance, and a very strong chance. I'd say maybe 60-70% of a chance that he wins it this year and walks away from the sport, which will be sad because that will be the end of an era in our sport. But I would definitely understand if that were the case.
Yeah, and I think it is set up. It is almost teed up for him to win the 8th championship. Like I say, it's not going to be a walk in the park. Winning a Formula 1 World Championship isn't that way. But for Lewis Hamilton's ability, given the car, given the team, it seems like a perfect opportunity for him to do that. And then at the end of this season, he at least has the opportunity to walk away. Being on this 1-year deal means that if he doesn't like the lay of the land heading into 2022, he can tell them to stuff it and he can walk away an 8-time world champion. Alternatively, if he still thinks Mercedes are going to be very strong and he still has the desire to keep racing, he has that opportunity as well. So I completely understand why he's gone with sort of the contract approach that he's gone with. You look at drivers in the past and there is a real mixture. If you look at Michael Schumacher as an example, he retires not quite on top, but he retires in 2006 after giving Alonso a run for his money for the championship. If he ends his career there, you could argue he's retired on top. Of course, he came back. Did that help his reputation? Did that help his legacy at all? I would argue not really. But then you've got drivers like Mika Hakkinen, let's say. He retired,
He hasn't retired?
Sorry, he's on a sabbatical. He's coming back next year. I'm going to say it. I think he's retired. But he retired in 2001. Literally just after 2 years after he'd won the championship. Alain Prost, of course, he retired, won the title and left and never came back. So there are instances where drivers do retire on top. It'd be interesting. I think it could. Nico Rosberg, another example.
King of the world.
But yeah, but then you see like Kimi Räikkönen. Kimi Räikkönen is clearly not bothered that he's racing in his early 40s and isn't the driver that he was in 2007, which is absolutely fine. That's his MO, and Lewis Hamilton has his own one. So I think it could go either way.
Well, yeah, that's the future. We can't predict it, folks. So let us know what you think.
If we could, we would be doing something else probably.
I'd have a lot of money. If I could predict the future, I'd have a lot of money. I'd probably be in Formula 1 if I could predict the future, I've got to be honest.
I'll tell you what, if you're watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments what you think he's going to do. And if you're listening on the podcast, get in touch with us on Twitter or whatever. Just tell us exactly how you think this is going to play out. And in a year's time, we'll come back to it and we'll pick out the absolute best and worst things that you've said.
Thanks for creating a whole video idea for you as well.
Yeah, great, that's perfect.
Right, shall we get out of here for the YouTubers listening?
We will. So yeah, what do you think for Lewis Hamilton? If you wouldn't mind, Sam, getting us out of here for this video.
Will Lewis Hamilton go on to win maybe a 9th world title after his 8th this year possibly, or will he be selling cotton candy and ice creams in the car park outside of Brands Hatch? Let us know what you think. Could be quite interesting. Maybe it's the World Championship winning cotton candy and ice cream outside Brands Hatch. You never know. He's very good at everything he does. In the meantime, check out the rest of the podcast if you haven't already over on Spotify and all your other lovely listening devices. And I've been Sam the Sage.
I've been Ben Hocking.
I've been Harry Eads.
And remember, keep breaking late.
Bye!